Hare Krishna. So the China mission has a very long history. It all started with an order that was given by Srila Prabhupada to Tamal Krishna Goswami in 1976. And at that point, he actually asked him if he would go to preach Krishna consciousness in China. But of course, as we know, the environment was not favorable at that time. And although he tried for a good year or more to try to make the arrangements to enter, it really wasn't possible. And when Srila Prabhupada heard that it was so difficult, he said, now the time is not right, but in the future there will be an arrangement for which we'll be able to enter and to preach Krishna consciousness. He said some interesting things also around the same time. He said that first let the books enter and the preaching field will be created. So later, when we established the temple in Hong Kong in 1980, one of our main objectives was to translate and publish Srila Prabhupada's books in the Chinese language. We set up the BBT in Hong Kong, and we published a number of titles, and we printed them in very large quantities. Now, a lot of those books were distributed in Hong Kong, but we also devised numerous ways to try to get those books into mainland China. One way was to distribute at the train stations, and those passengers going to mainland China would take the books in with them, and other such things. So we distributed many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books, and many of them made their ways into mainland China. So after establishing the temple in Hong Kong, and eventually making local Chinese devotees, and doing the things that devotees do all over the world, like Harinam Sankirtan and book distribution and prasadam distribution and festivals, there then came an opportunity in 1988. We went to Mayapur that year, and the GBC of Russia at the time, Kirtiraj Prabhu, had the experience of Russia kind of changing and opening up and embracing some sort of democracy. And he told us that we should just try, just attempt. He said, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Why not try it? So we made a plan, led by His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami. There were just 4 of us on that original party. And the idea was quite simple. It was just to go and chant in the parks. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we wore just normal, conventional clothing, and we entered China. Mind you, China just opened at this time to accept tourists. So we went on tourist visas. And after going into China, we changed into our saffron dress, into sannyas clothing, and the other devotees were brahmacharis. And we went to different parks. We went to parks in Guangzhou, parks in Shanghai, parks in Beijing. This was the first tour. And the plan was that the mornings and the evenings we would chant for a couple of hours each session. Now, one of the first kirtans we had was in, Shanghai, and we weren't sure what the response was going to be. We were really prepared for anything, including being asked to leave. But we sat down, put down a simple mat, and just with mridanga and kartals, we started a kirtan. And after a very short while, so many persons, they started to gather around. First, there were 2 and 5 and 10 and then 20. And before practically a half an hour passed, there were a good 100 to 200 people kind of surrounding us, listening and wondering what was it all about. So through a translator, one of the devotees who was Western-bodied, he also spoke fluent Chinese. He translated quite a brilliant lecture that was given by His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami, explaining to them that this was a very ancient yoga practice, a form of meditation known as mantra meditation. And he was so very expert and also forceful in his presentation that we started to notice many heads were nodding in the audience, kind of acknowledging, but more than acknowledging, they were kind of accepting that this was, somewhat or somehow a part of their ancient culture as well. So they can immediately identify with it, and they had quite an appreciation. Then the next thing we did is that we held a contest for who could chant the loudest. And different persons in the audience, they were really trying their best to learn the mantra and to chant it loudly. And the person who won, who was the most enthusiastic chanter, received as a gift one of Srila Prabhupada's books. The thing is, though, when we tried to hand that book out, not only his hand came to grab it, but so many other hands in the audience simultaneously came, and the book was torn into small little pieces. That was one of our biggest problems. But by and by, we did this in many places, and to hundreds and thousands of people. Many received the holy name, they received Srila Prabhupada's books. It led to us also giving presentations in universities or just where any place we possibly could. So this was the beginning. It was interesting that it was based on the same principle that Srila Prabhupada established when he chanted at Tompkins Square Park in the middle of New York City, which is simply to sit underneath a huge tree and chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Because the fact is that the beginning and end of our process is to chant Krishna's holy names. Very powerful, and it pierces the heart, and it purifies it of all of the many coverings. From the beginning of the China mission, we always knew that we wanted to have deities in mainland China. This was a practice that Srila Prabhupada established right from the beginning, the first center at 26 2nd Avenue. He began his programs by offering incense and a short artik to his little Radha Govinda deities. And at the time, those first devotees had no idea what he was doing. They even started to call the ceremony bells, because Srila Prabhupada was ringing the bell. But he had so much faith in the worship of the Lord's Archa-Vigraha form that he established this right from the beginning. He wanted to establish that Krishna is a person. He wanted people to get some visual perception of God and to worship that form. So we, of course, established a deity earlier on in Hong Kong, and we always kind of look forward to the day when we would establish the deity in mainland China. We thought it was especially important because, well, in this part of the world, there's a lot of impersonalism. Now, whatever philosophies are there, they're largely impersonal, accepting only some formless energy as the absolute truth. And we don't hear much about a personal idea. So we thought deity worship, Srila Prabhupada thought it was so important, should be established as soon as it possibly could. So we were thinking about this. And finally, when some of the first yatras began to take shape and become a little bit more established, when there were more steady devotees and there was more of an opportunity to have a small center where devotees would come regularly and participate in programs, and who would also commit to the process of deity worship. We kind of made a decision that we should at least try and experiment with it. And the first place that we thought that we would do this was NanNing, because being one of the first yatras and having some of the most steady devotees at the time, we thought that this would be the most appropriate place and the most likely for the process of deity worship to succeed. So it was in 1995 at Nityananda Trayodasi that we brought in those small neemwood deities, which I believe were made in Ekachakra. And as Chandrasekhar Prabhu tells me, because he was the one that actually installed them, and he was the only foreign devotee there at the time. It was a simple ceremony, but it was a real step forward for the China mission, because this was the first time that installed deities were being worshipped in the mainland of China. Through the years, those deities have been constantly worshipped quite nicely. It's to the credit of NanNing devotees that despite all the ups and downs with, the situation of the country and different ups and downs with devotees, as is always the case, that they maintain a very wonderful standard of deity worship. Srila Prabhupada would be proud. His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami was certainly proud, and we know that we were all proud of this. So to this day they are maintaining a very nice standard of deity worship. It's so important. It helps us to have this perception of Krishna. It allows us to not only visualize his form, but also to render him a variety of different services. We can cook for the deity, we can make offerings of those foodstuffs to the deity, we can bathe the deity, dress the deity, offer artik to the deity, and really think that the temple or the center or the home is all the property of the deity. And so it's a meditation. We start to develop a very personal relationship with the deity. We remember what the deity is wearing, how he was ornamented, and so many other things. So it helps to focus the consciousness. So we would hope that more and more devotees will be worshiping deities, providing they're qualified to do so. So many already are doing that, and so many more in the future will certainly do that. But it's noteworthy that NanNing was the first, so all good credit goes to them. The China mission is gradually expanding. So many new opportunities are opening up. So many opportunities that weren't there in the past. We're able to reach out to higher classes of people. We're able to chant the holy name much more than we did certainly in the beginning. And people are much more receptive. There seems to be a growing awareness of higher things. There seems to be a hunger for spiritual life, a spiritual process. Because ultimately everyone is looking for something. They don't know what it is necessarily, but they're looking for something because there's a vacancy in their lives. There's a vacuum. Something is not fulfilling them. Although they may have all the trappings of modern life. They may have good wealth and good position and nice home and all the rest, but still something is lacking. So we see that the future for the China mission is bright, and devotees have to seize the opportunities before them. At least they should have a desire to get out there and to spread Krishna consciousness to whoever they possibly can, be it family members, friends, colleagues, or whoever. If the desire is there, as it says in English, with a will there's a way. So we would request devotees to please try to kindle that desire. And preaching is not a very difficult thing. As Lord Chaitanya told the Kurma Brahmana, that preaching means simply to repeat the instructions that are offered in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Simply repeat them in your own words. And that's preaching. Preaching means to give Prabhupada's books, to give the holy name, to give prasadam. And the wonderful thing is, the more that we do that, the more we become enlivened in Krishna consciousness. And it's always been my belief that we need both things. Our practice kind of runs on two tracks. One track is our practice of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti and preaching work. The two things go hand in hand. If we do good sadhana bhakti, we have enthusiasm to preach. And if we preach, we have a deeper enthusiasm for performing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So two things work hand in hand. It's also a fact that if we just make the endeavor to preach, to reach out to even one other soul, that Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are so pleased with that they bless us. And with those blessings and with that mercy, advancement in Krishna consciousness is much, much easier and much, much quicker. So if there's any secret to advancement in Krishna consciousness, it's to perform good Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti and to preach Krishna consciousness. So I pray that this upcoming festival for the NanNing Yatra and the celebration of the deities there some 20 years ago will be a very wonderful gathering of devotees, and they will come away with renewed vigor and enthusiasm for practicing and preaching Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.
So we heard from His Holiness Giridhari Swami something of the history of the Chinese Yatra. NanNing was not one of the first cities which we developed. It came later. We had begun in Guangzhou, Beijing and Shanghai. And then the preaching or our attempts to establish anything in China were interrupted. In 1989, there was some disturbance in China. So we had to retreat back to Hong Kong. And then we came back into China in the 1990s. I think it was Sankirtan Prabhu had gone to NanNing, and he had cultivated some young men, a couple of young men there in NanNing. And afterwards, I was asked to go there to NanNing, and I went along with Dayonitai Prabhu, and we both studied. We took a course there in Chinese language at one of the universities. And after one semester, then Dayonitai left and went to another city in China, and then Chandrasekhar Prabhu came and stayed with me. And so I was there for 2 semesters in NanNing. And I think I was there also on my own for some time. this was before the deities were established. So we found Nanning at that time in the 1990s. Nanning was quite a different city from what it is today. It was much smaller, and we had a few devotees come from other cities. I remember Gauranga Prema came from Shenzhen, and then also Jai Bali came. He was originally, Jai Bali was from Nanning, but Chandra Prabhu came from Xi'an, and a few other people, different cities, they came to Nanning, and we were having a small ashram there in Nanning, and the devotees would go out even on book distribution on the streets of Nanning. Every Sunday, without fail, we would have a program in the Nanhu Gongyuan in Nanning, and it became a very nice program. We'd stay there for 4, 5, 6 hours every day, on every Sunday in Nanning. And we were fortunate, the weather was usually good, there was no problem, it was pleasant to be there in the park, and we would have kirtan, and we would have our class, and we would have some prasadam distribution, and people would come and sit and listen, and some interested people would sit and inquire. So in this way we were having our programs. We were over the years there in Nanning, and now we're talking like the deities have been there 20 years, so the devotees have been coming to Nanning for more than that, because it was 2 or 3 years before the deities were brought there. So we've had a lot of preaching there, we've distributed a lot of books, and to the present day, book distribution is going on very nicely. Nanning is famous for fruits. They grow so many nice fruits there in Nanning. And Srimad Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of the Vedas. So it's interesting that we're able to distribute so many sets of Srimad Bhagavatam also there in Nanning. Many people have taken an interest in our books. It's not so easy for them to take up Krishna consciousness. The rules and regulations are a challenge for people in China. It's something which is not so easily taken up. You know, everywhere in the world today people are irreligious, and it's common. Meat eating, alcohol, these kind of things are just accepted by society everywhere. So difficult for people to follow regulated principles, but they do have a respect for culture, and they do respect also the philosophy, the deep wisdom which is there within Prabhupada's books. So from the beginning we've been distributing books there, and that book distribution continues to go on. It's very nice that the deities have been worshipped for so long. The deity worship has been achieved in a manner which is not over demanding for the devotees there. It's the basic principles of worship there. We don't have 7 offerings a day, but they have 3 offerings a day. And the deities' dresses and the jewelry and crowns are often made by the devotees there. But every day also, devotees arrange flower garlands, many flowers are offered. Again, we're fortunate. One of our devotees is working with flowers. She has something of a business with flowers, so she takes it as a personal service to provide the garlands for the deities. And of course the cooking goes on every day. There has to be offerings made. And we know everywhere where we have temples, it's a challenge to maintain such standards, to cook every day. It's not an easy thing. But somehow the worship is going on. We've had people come from other parts of China and also help. In the recent times, the worship has been going on with the local people, the local devotees. Sometimes even the local devotees still need help. They request, if people can come from other cities and assist them in the worship, then they're happy. Because our devotees are also getting older now in NanNing. They're not so young. Young people are coming, but young people are also busy. They have so many other things to do. They get married, they have their jobs, they don't get so much time. But the older, retired people, they are giving a lot of time, a lot of service. One of the difficulties over the years in NanNing is that devotees came and then somehow they drifted away. Sometimes they gave up Krishna consciousness, sometimes they gave up ISKCON and they went to other groups, other parties. So we've had our losses, but somehow the program is going on, we're maintaining, and we hope that we can continue to grow. It's never easy to spread Krishna consciousness. As it said in the Bhagavad Gita, only one man among thousands is endeavoring for perfection. And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows Krishna in truth. So devotees are rare. And even of devotees, we can't expect that all the devotees will just be ISKCON devotees. There are other groups also. So we have to understand that, and we have to also make our program so attractive that people want to be a part of ISKCON, and that they're happy to be a part of ISKCON, and they feel right that they're close to Srila Prabhupada, who pioneered Krishna consciousness all over the world. So we want devotees to feel their connection with Srila Prabhupada, and also, of course, Tamal Krishna Goswami, who sacrificed so much for introducing Krishna consciousness into China. I remember how he would come and visit NanNing, and when he would come, we would rent a suite in a big hotel. Now in those days, in the 1990s, there were not many big hotels in NanNing. There were only a few. And so we'd select some big hotel, and we would rent a big suite, and then we would bring in stove and a big gas cylinder, and we would do our cooking there, and all the devotees would come, and we'd have kirtan and program all day. So I remember after we had a program in one very big hotel, probably it was the most prestigious hotel in NanNing at the time, and we just had a big program there for 3 days, and the devotee went over to the counter to pay the bill, and the person behind the counter said, "We heard you're cooking in the room. We heard you're singing and dancing in the room." And the devotee just looked at him in the face and very innocently and very sweetly said, "No, we're not. No, we're not." So anyway, by that time we were already moving. We were leaving anyway, so it wasn't a big thing. But this was the program, and this is how we first brought Krishna consciousness to NanNing. That chanting, dancing, prasadam, and some philosophy. It's the same program everywhere. The devotees of Krishna are everywhere. Prabhupada said, we just have to find them. We just have to go with the kartals, and somebody will come and we can give them the mridanga, and they can play or we can play mridanga, and somebody can come, we'll give them the kartals, so we'll join the kirtan. So we're continuing our program in this way. We have the park program still goes on regularly. Devotees go to the park, and although the park has become quite a different place from what it was in the beginning, it's a much bigger park and it looks very different to me now. But still it's a park and we can still go there, we still go there and chant. And of course the worship of Gaur Nitai is going on nicely. We hope it will continue to go on. When we bring the deities somewhere, once the temple is established, the deity is brought, then the temple can never be closed. The worship must continue. So this is the principle. And Srila Prabhupada was very concerned about this, that we will continue the worship. And we shouldn't think the worship of the deity is a burden, but rather we should feel enthusiastic and happy that the deities have come there to NanNing and they're helping us to distribute Krishna consciousness to everyone. So we wish all the devotees on this 20th anniversary of the establishing of the deities in NanNing, we wish all the devotees to have a joyous celebration and that they will continue throughout their lives to take part in this worship of Gaur Nitai and take shelter at the feet of Gaur Nitai, and in this way our life will become successful. Hare Krishna.